Now, uncertainty remains high around the world tonight as Egypt's presidential runoff has ended. Mohammed Morsi, a longtime member of the Muslim Brotherhood, is about to become the first Islamist president of Egypt. And what does the Obama administration think of this new development? Well, they are reportedly, quote, relieved. Now, this, according to the New York Times story, which states that President Obama, quote, the crisis underway in Egypt has put him in an awkward position, champion of America's longtime foe and critic of America's longtime ally. But just who is this administration relieved to have as Egypt's next leader? Well, for starters, he's no ally of Israel. Morsi, in the past, has called the Israelis, quote, vampires and killers. And today, in an interview with an Iranian news agency, he is quoted as saying he intends to reconsider the Camp David Accord. And yet, despite these outrageous comments, the White House is relieved? Joining me now with reaction, Fox News contributor Liz Cheney. Liz, relieved to have the Muslim Brotherhood, let's see, they referred to the Israelis as vampires, killers, a known terrorist organization. Relieved? I'm not relieved. This could be disastrous from my position. I want to get your take.
No, you're exactly right, Sean. They said they were relieved. They've welcomed it. You know, and in fact, even more troubling, I've heard from a number of liberals in Egypt, people who should be with the United States, asking why is it that the United States is now backing the Muslim Brotherhood? The Muslim Brotherhood is anti-freedom. They're anti-women. They're anti-Christian. They're anti-Jew. They're anti-Israel. They're anti-American. They're anti-democratic. They're very closely allied with, in fact, the same organization as Hamas. They are the organization that spawned al-Qaeda. Ayman al-Zawahiri, who's now the leader of al-Qaeda, began in the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. So you've got a situation now where you've got this organization in charge, potentially, in Egypt, which is the most populous Arab nation, and, you know, setting us up here for a real conflict, it looks like, between the Muslim Brotherhood and the military, while at the same time the United States, in what is really incomprehensible, seems to be welcoming this turn of events.
You know, why is this was never been a surprise? You mentioned they're anti-Jew, anti-Israel. We know what's happening to the Coptic Christians in Egypt, et cetera. You say all of this, and yet President Obama, and through his Secretary of State, actually seemed to come out in support of the win of the Muslim Brotherhood, even before it was announced on Sunday.
Right. And, you know, we heard reports, for example, that you had Christian villages where people were told by representatives of the Brotherhood, don't go vote, don't go to the polling places, stay home. And at the same time, you had that kind of pressure going on. The administration here seemed to be assuming that the only pressure that might be put on the electoral process would come from the ruling military. I think that, you know, you've got now a situation where this president's foreign policy, whether you're talking about leaving Iraq, leaving Afghanistan, allowing the Iranian mullahs to continue to produce, to attempt to produce a nuclear weapon, having the Muslim Brotherhood come to power in Egypt, people have got to begin to ask who is benefiting from Barack Obama's foreign policy. And time again, sadly and disturbingly, it's America's enemies who are benefiting.
It seems to me, Liz, and we saw this early on when, you know, all that was going on, the so-called Arab Spring, which was supported by the president and the promises of democracy, and now we've got a known terrorist organization with a known terrorist sympathizer now as the president. Seems that radical Islamists in the Middle East, you know, we look through Syria, we look to North Africa, we take it all the way to Iran. It seems that we're living in an age of the rise of radical Islamists. And it seems like there is, you know, a growing alliance against Israel in the United States. Where can this possibly end? Because it doesn't seem like it can end in any way that's going to be good.
No, I think there are a couple of things that people need to watch very closely here. One is to understand that, you know, democracy means more than an election, and that, you know, the United States needs to stand for the values of freedom, the values of equality, the values of liberalism, none of which are represented by the Muslim Brotherhood, and we need to not be confused about that. Secondly, you're going to have a lot of people, a lot of commentators saying, well, gosh, the Muslim Brotherhood's moderate. They're moderate Muslims. They are not. There are, in fact, millions and millions of moderate moderate Muslims, including, 12 million of them in Egypt alone, nearly half the people who voted, who said, we don't want to be ruled by these people. Morsi lost his own home governorate, which has long been a stronghold for the Brotherhood. But people should be aware that the Muslim Brotherhood is not moderate. They are, in fact, an extremist organization. You had an important speech just tonight, actually, in London by the Director General of the British MI5, their domestic intelligence service, saying that, in fact, the Arab Spring is creating a more welcoming circumstance for al-Qaeda in the short term across the Middle East. And I think there's no question about that.
Morsi's first rally in 2012, he led supporters in a chant, "The Quran is our constitution, Sharia is our guide." Why do I see this as almost as historic a moment as what happened in 1979 with the Ayatollah coming out of exile?
Yeah, I think that is the real fear here and the real potential concern for us. You also had one of Morsi's campaign rallies. You had one of his surrogates, while he was there on stage in front of hundreds of thousands of people, talk about how we're going to use jihad to make Jerusalem our capital. And while you've got this surge of extremism happening across the Arab world, simultaneously you've got the United States pulling back. And we have a president who, I believe, for the first time, at least in modern history, has had as his objective leaving America weaker than when he took office. And you only have to listen to his own words to understand how true that is. But the combination there, is potentially explosive. It's bad for Israel. It's bad for us. And the Iranians, in the meantime, are working away day in and day out to develop a nuclear weapon, while the White House leaks secrets about some of the programs we were allegedly working on to stop it.
The president couldn't have been more wrong about the Arab Spring. We predicted from day one that what happened yesterday would probably happen, and this may go down in history as the biggest foreign policy blunder of Obama's presidency. But we'll watch it closely, and it's always good to see it. Thank you, Liz.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean.